3. Justification and target acquisition. They who employ force by proxy are as much responsible for that force as though they employed it themselves. Herbert Spencer. If you're reading this, then it shouldn't be necessary to go to great lengths or to spend a lot of energy convincing you that preemptive self-defense is always the wisest form of self-defense. Also, it shouldn't be necessary to justify the concept of engaging in irregular warfare with proven aggressors like individual violent police, specific decision-makers, or military actors who follow orders and kill on command. But the difficult thing about government is that by its very design, it's a massive structure created to shift the blame to so many hands that no one can be held responsible. The collectivist notion is perhaps best displayed in the story of the death of Julius Caesar, where each senator took a turn stabbing Caesar so that no one person could be guilty of the assassination. Of course, that only works as a collectivist argument. The moment you introduce individual accountability, the collectivist argument vanishes like a shadow in sunlight. So, how do we determine the level of responsibility of each statist, and how do we determine what our response to each of those statists should be once we accept our role as individual warriors engaging in irregular warfare? That can be a question of extreme complexity if we allow it to be, but it's simply not necessary to allow it to be complex if we narrow our fight to targets where no question is present. In other words, don't allow yourself to be caught up in such a target-rich environment that you fail to see the obvious shots. Think of the lion in the field with 1,000 gazelle. Once he reveals himself, they will all bolt, and his field of vision will be filled with moving shapes and bouncing targets. The wise lion doesn't just go for whichever gazelle jumps, because the moment they run, none of them will be catchable. The wise lion picks out one easy shot. He takes his time. He prepares. He knows the wasted attempt is wasted energy, and he knows he can't afford wasted energy. Failed hunts mean starvation. So he fixes his eyes on one target, and when the moment happens, he refuses to be distracted. For the individual warrior, the state provides such a target-rich environment that it's easy to be distracted. It's easy to chase philosophical rabbits down never-ending rabbit holes, debating about which cops are good and which are bad, and if the mailman is robbing you through taxation, or if the parking enforcement officer has crossed some line, or you can stop, clear your mind, focus, and do your job. There are plenty of violent cops with incredibly horrible records who have been documented and filmed beating homeless people for no reason and killing anyone who crosses them, and there are plenty of bureaucrats enabling and protecting those violent cops. We don't need to attack a collective any more than we need to be distracted by that collective. We need to carefully do our homework, review our decisions with a verifiable process, and take the needed actions to secure our freedom. As we pick the fruit that is ripe, the tree will see to it that more fruit ripens in its time. 3-1. Pause and review. Let's pause for a moment and review a line that you just read. We need to 1. Carefully do our homework. 2. Review our decisions with a verifiable process. And 3. Take the needed actions to secure our freedom. These 3 points are critical. 3-1.1. Do your homework. The first thing to keep in mind is that we are not concerned about justifying our actions to a government court. If it comes to that, we are sunk. In the minds of the statists, we're already criminals just for discussing these things, much more so for acting on them. Our concern should primarily be what is right and what is wrong. This is why the statement was made earlier that we should concentrate on picking the fruit that is ripe. We shouldn't take action against any target where there is doubt of guilt. We should take our time, research accusations, and be slow to make our judgment. The exception being a situation where time is pressing and the target is actively a serious threat to the innocent. But under normal circumstances, where we have time to rely on the investigative process, the individual warriors can work with trusted non-combatant members of the underground. Activity like gathering video evidence of crimes, hacking personal files, gathering of private data like addresses, shopping habits, and any other information that will help the underground build a fair and honest profile of the accused target and the activities in his private life would be tremendously helpful. This process is especially important for the less obvious targets like bureaucrats, key corporate enablers, and even drone operators who do their murdering behind the cloak of government secrecy. 3-1.2. Review decisions with a verifiable process. Again, assuming the target is not an immediate and serious threat to the innocent, then we can consider two options. The first being the best practice, and the second being a less desirable practice that should only be used when absolutely necessary. The best practice would be a reviewable collecting and documenting of the accusations, followed by a specific stating of the charges, then followed by a review by at least 3 reliable parties. Finally, either a unanimous decision of the 3 reliable parties, or delay until a unanimous decision can be agreed upon. If a unanimous decision is not directly forthcoming, that target should be dropped from consideration and the next target up for review should be considered. This process could be done both privately and secretly, while the overall process can be recorded in the Bitcoin blockchain for later review and public scrutiny. It will cost a very small amount of Bitcoin to make a transaction with an encrypted transcript embedded in the transaction, so that after the fact, if the results of the trial need to be reviewed, the encryption key could be released or even shared on a need-to-know basis and either open to the public or it could remain locked if no one challenged the trial or the process. The less desirable practice would be a direct private conversation between 2 or 3 individual warriors working together as a team, and if agreement is made as to the target's guilt, then the team does what they need to do. Circumstances may dictate that this process is the only one available. That would be unfortunate, but sometimes a perfect world is simply not available. 3-1.3. Taking action. In a perfect world, we would make our strike as the target is attacking a victim. A public display such as this could work in our favor, but if botched or if there is some public question as to guilt of the target, then this could become a publicity nightmare. Also, if you consider the structure of the state, the obvious killers wear police uniforms and usually only kill one at a time, but the real murderers in government kill dozens or even thousands with a few words or the stroke of a pen on paper. The best practice is a quiet, preferably private situation when the target is alone and it can be made to look like an accident or a suicide, or the target can simply vanish. The longer the individual warriors are working without being seen or even suspected of existing, the better we are doing our job. In this process, we can take a lesson from the CIA and other such crime syndicates that operate in the shadows. Always remember, we are not in this for the gore or the glory. We're in this to free the world of those who relish in gore and glory. We must always guard that we don't become what we fight. One method that may be helpful would be for a strike team to come together for a specific job within a specific time frame. Then once the event is done, the team could disband and return to normal life with no team contact until a preset time. With enough teams working in rotation, the burden of such actions can be lightened, and it can be harder for our enemy to discover the functioning of our networks.